Now, I absolutely love living in Fort Collins. Do not get me wrong. It is obviously I created this channel about a place that I grew up in, born and raised, and love talking about. But I would say having weather events like heavy winds or hail season that's coming up, heavy snows, heavy rains, all of those things. Now, in my later years in life, I'm in my mid 30s, so not too old by any means, but now it just gives me like anxiety because I'm like, all right, is everything going to be all right? Is my trampoline going to blow away? My roof's going to fly apart, hail damage, have to do siding repairs, painting. Oh, my camera's been a little bit funky, so I might have to jump in and out, but we'll keep going. So it's definitely been something that is par for the course in Colorado. We have a higher altitude, so hail season starting April 15th runs through September 15th. With our worst month, I'm gonna unplug this and plug this back in. So let's see if this works. So sorry about this. Let's go. Try again. All right, we'll see if that works. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Well, hopefully that won't happen anymore. But middle of June is really when we are historically bad for our hail season, and like the Eastern Plains get smoked. And I would say the one thing that Fort Collins, and I would say the Front Range, generally speaking, so long as you're kind of tucked up along those foothills, sometimes those weather events kind of jump you and go over I-25 and kind of hit home in Windsor and then east, Timnitz, Severance, heading out east to Sterling and Brush and Haxton. All those Eastern Plains areas seem to get hit pretty heavy with wind and hail and all that fun stuff. But Fort Collins isn't immune to it by any means. And it's interesting how hail hits. It's kind of like a tornado. It could absolutely demolish one side of the street and leave the other side of the street completely fine. One side of the street could look like it's a snow event that has happened, and the other side is completely dry. So it happens fast. Not much that you can do, but I would say, find an overhanging tree, get your car in the garage. But we are starting to enter that season. It was, I've talked with a few people. We have a 3-car garage, but only one car parks in the garage. And it's for the convenience of the van that, we have a refrigerator in there, and my truck just doesn't fit. But I would say if a hailstorm was coming, we would pull that truck in as far as possible because, yes, you're covered with insurance, but man, the headache of dealing with it, no thank you. And one thing I've been noticing across dealerships across Colorado is kind of these covered car lots. They've got parking spots that they're covered because there's always, if there is a big hail event, there always seems to be a hail sale that, hey, we're going to discount these cars, insurance is paid out, we're going to get rid of them, and people get deals on them. But as my own house, I've gone through one hailstorm, one hail event, and new roof, painted like I think two of the 4 sides, and then got a new garage door. But our deductible, all that good stuff, and people's insurance premiums start to increase across the state of Colorado. And a lot of insurers these days are going to go from a flat deductible to a percentage deductible. And we talk to a lot of our clients that are buying houses here in Northern Colorado that if you can find a carrier that will do a flat deductible, it might be worth exploring. Now, you get a little bit less you get a bit less premium if you do a percent deductible because, well, hey, if you have a loss, your deductible is going to be a little bit more than that flat rate. So we're coming up on that season, but the spring, it can be a coin flip. We had folks move here from Boston 2 years ago, and it was such a windy spring. It was just kind of like not that enjoyable. And then last spring, there was no wind at all. And then yesterday we had extremely, heavy gusting winds and just kind of par for the course to live in Fort Collins. And I look at my wife, I'm like, I hate weather. It just gives me this this internal kind of unease about what's going to happen. It could happen fast. And we own a fair amount of rental properties in Fort Collins. So it just is a headache when it comes to that. But get prepared, get ready, make sure your insurance is right. If you have a current homeowner's policy, one thing that you could do is shop that homeowner's policy out. you could go and you could talk to different carriers, see if they have a flat rate. Maybe it's not a $1,000 deductible, maybe it's a $5,000 deductible, comparatively to a percent of the building's value premium, because hey, it can definitely get expensive. And then if you have to replace your roof, all of a sudden your deductible is $10,000. It costs $12,000 to replace your roof. Is it worth putting in that claim? Maybe not. So that's an opportunity for you to go check out your insurance. Make sure that your insurance is all where it needs to be. Now, I appreciate you guys watching, but the eclipse is going on right now. It's I believe 11:30 to 2:30. Fort Collins is only going to see about 63% of coverage, but it was really kind of cool to see a map of short-term rental Airbnb activity across kind of that northeast to the across the Sun Belt states, and all the activity that's happened. So it's going to be happening now. The peak of its coverage in Fort Collins is at 12:41. So we'll get out of here before then, so I can go look at it, maybe with my kids and everything like that. But other than that, let's see here. Speaking about weather, it's getting warmer. I can't wait. 70 degrees are in the forecast. We've had some phenomenal. We've actually had really decently warm winter, January, February. Not too much snow. We could still get hit until the end of April, beginning of May. But ski resorts are starting to shut down. Some notable ones that have set their closing dates are Aspen, April 21st, Breckenridge, May 12th. So that's a little bit out there. Copper, April 28th. Eldora, just a couple hours away from Fort Collins, April 21st. Keystone, April 7th. Loveland, to be determined. Loveland always seems to be one of those ones that stay open, a little bit later than most. But let's go here. Steamboat, April 21st, and Vail, April 21st. Just talked with somebody today. They couldn't get up to ski this weekend. They shut off the Eisenhower Tunnel because I believe of the winds that were going on. And one of my buddies did get up and was skiing on the mountain, and it just looked absolutely miserable. But I think one of the things that we're going to consider next year, now we've had some life changes recently that might change this a little bit, but we were talking about getting a ski pass and teach the kids skiing. I learned when I was 2 years old. I don't know if any of you have done that. I mean, obviously, it's super expensive these days, and we're lucky that we actually have family that has a condo and Steamboat, so we get to use that, so we can kind of leverage at least our housing expenses, minimal to nothing. But rentals and ski passes, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on, if you have kids, what you're doing, how you're kind of progressing. Because I will say, being able to ski, going skiing is extremely fun. Janae can do that. Lots of friends. Definitely is super expensive, but something that I've also noticed, families who ski together, really enjoy that together, and really brings them together a million times. Sorry about that. But I'm curious if you guys have either kiddos or teens. At what age did you start having them take lessons? And do you find yourself, how often do you find yourself skiing? And do you think it's worth it? And what I mean by life changes is, I think I talked about it last week. We're under contract on a cabin in Red Feather. And one thing I talked to my wife about before going under contract on this house is like, hey, if we do this, it's going to cost us a certain amount each month. And I'd want to use the cabin if we're going to be doing this. And so that kind of takes away from maybe our time skiing. There's only so much expense that we want to take on. And if we're going to be spending this money, are we going to be spending more time in Red Feather than we would be going skiing elsewhere? So would love to hear your thoughts on, do you ski with your kids, your family? And at what age did you start, and how often do you do it on a monthly basis? Let's see here. The Compost Queen is opening up a new facility April 21st for food recycling. And, it was interesting listening to the work session about our waste shelf, our basically between Larimer County, our Larimer County waste shelf between Loveland, Fort Collins, Red Feather, Estes, all of these communities, and how we are going to get to, essentially, like by 2030, net zero trash, I believe is what it is. And the way they're going to do that is by trash diversion, energy, food waste composting, lots of different techniques, and then technology as well. And it'll be interesting to see if we can get there. But one of the things that's happening is food composting. We personally, Janae has tried to food compost. I don't want to throw her under the bus at all. I don't think we've really committed to it. I know it's definitely something that's great for soils, but the Compost Queen is going to open up a facility off of South College Avenue. And let's see, I've got the exact 1505 North College Avenue, excuse me. And you can become a member, pick up a bucket, put your food scraps in there. They would pick it up. It's a membership type deal. And actually there's grants that the Compost Queen is having, but do you guys food compost? I don't think we do a very good job out of it, our family. They've tried. It seems like it's a pretty decent undertaking, and you've got to be really committed to it. But I think it'd be great if there was something like this where there was a service of people who kind of taught, educated, here's what you can do. You can leave out these buckets. We'll come and pick them up. But again, that also impacts travel and carbon, our carbon emissions. And so, what's worse, throwing the food scraps away or having extra cars on the lot? I don't know. You tell me. I don't know very much about that kind of stuff. So let's see here. Moving on to the Ladera project. Timnath, Wellington, and Windsor all had their elections this last week. And one of the big ones, I think, for Northern Colorado is this Ladera project in Timnath. 30% of the residents vote, 30% of the 6,000 residents voted. So about close to 2,000 people voted. And it was a big win for the Ladera project that essentially said, no, we don't have to require this reclamation project because there's already $500,000 from Connell, and we're going to allow the city to continue with this annexation, which essentially, from my understanding, except I know there also is a lawsuit out there, but essentially gives a green light for the Ladera project to move forward. And this Ladera project is going to be huge for the Harmony and I-25 corridor. And you can just already see when you're driving through, I think it's Weitzel, and you can connect to County Road 5 from there. And on either side, they've already got the infrastructure in place with the streets. And I mean, this is going to be a very big development and going to bring in a lot of sales tax dollars to Timnath. And it'll be, a big deal for sure. Let's see here. There was this week's meeting. They talked about city council getting more involved. There was a lot of public comment, about an hour's worth of public comment. They talked about the ceasefire for Gaza, Poudre School District parents getting in, city council getting involved. And then also the actual item for discussion was, can city council move their meetings to be remote? And they did vote for that 7-0. But a big topic of conversation for them was, should city council get involved with the PSD discussion of this school consolidation, redrawing of zones and not districts, but redrawing of boundaries. And yes, it was overwhelmingly discussed that yes, they should, because it's going to impact how much drive time there's going to be for parents. If, let's say schools get shut down on the west side and they have to drive a little bit more midtown, or on the southeast side, like Bamford and Bethkey, maybe don't have a middle school at Timnath anymore and have to go to Preston. So there's lots of moving parts. And I would say it's a very engaged conversation that's happening right now within the city of Fort Collins. And there was this interesting conversation that Jenny started talking about, actually, was that a lot of now I don't know if there's actual locations, maybe there is, but she had made a comment that a lot of the people who are kind of against the densification and the multi-use dwellings, multi-generational, different housing types, a lot of the petition signatures came from people on the west side of Fort Collins, which is also where currently the majority of the impacts are going to occur for school consolidation, based off of the 4 proposals. And that can very much change. So, it could very much change across all these different things. But she was suggesting that, hey, if we had these different housing options, ADUs that people could afford, maybe a duplex, maybe a triplex, that the densification of that west side might actually happen, and then therefore they wouldn't have to do or consider these school closures. But as we discussed a couple weeks ago, really the big thing is that the demographics have changed significantly in Fort Collins. The west side population has aged in place, and not a lot of new families can either afford or are available to buy in that area. So Olander, Blevins, Beatty, McGraw, different schools on that west side, CLP, are up for potential consolidation into other schools. And, possibly, yeah, if there was the land use development code that changed, maybe there's ADUs that even are built now, because it did pass in 2022, which, after talking to, I believe her name was Rebecca Everett, I'm pretty certain, who's actually coincidentally on the school board that's discussing this consolidation, suggested that it was probably going to take about 12 months before a shovel could get into the dirt. So we would have seen now, probably early 2024, our first ADUs if 2022's land development code change would have taken place. And possibly this 50% plus supply of housing could have started to take shape. Now, obviously, all of that's kind of a moot point because that didn't pass. Land Use Code 2.0 didn't pass. And now we're kind of on a very much watered down version that's going through planning and zoning, soon to go in front of city council, and we'll see what ultimately happens there. But super interested to hear what your guys' thoughts are on that in regards to housing supply and infill, all that good stuff. I can definitely see it from both sides, but regardless, serious conversations are happening right now within Poudre School District. Fort Collins, Preserve Fort Collins had an article out of who is Preserve Fort Collins and what do they stand for. We have a YIMBY podcast coming out in a week from Wednesday. So definitely watch that to see what they stand for. But would love to hear your conversation. And should we get, Ross Cunniff, if he'd be willing to, onto the podcast and try to ask him, what do you stand for Preserve Fort Collins? Because there's kind of two sides of the table of Preserve Fort Collins and YIMBY, and big implications. Fort Collins is kind of going through some growing pains. It's got some odd, as I would call it, Osgood slaughters in the knees. And, I remember growing up and having my knees like hurting from growing pains and things of that nature. But it feels like Fort Collins is kind of doing a little bit of that. Very desirable place to stay, to live, to own, to buy, to rent, to be here. But it's expensive, and people who have been here their entire lives and have kids graduating from high school, wanting to go to school here, seeing and feeling those rents, then maybe wanting to buy a house, but maybe can't afford to, so have to buy in Windsor or Timnath. So there's definitely, it's a dynamic time in Fort Collins, and for so many different reasons, but it's a great time to get involved. Hopefully this live in Fort Collins helps you get some information of where to and how to get involved, or at least relatively understanding what's happening, so then you can do a little bit more research and see where you and how you want to get involved. Now, that's it for today. Plenty of things happening. Go watch the solar eclipse. It's going to be at 63% in Fort Collins here very shortly. And otherwise, I appreciate you guys watching, and have a great day.